This is the lamp, shining in dark places, and in this video we're uncovering some things that no one has told you. Back at the beginning, a great deal of discussion centered on the evolution of it. Where did it come from? Was it natural or not? Did it develop in an animal or in a lab? Was it accidentally released or intentionally released? During that period, independent scientists all over the world began to look at the sequence of genetic material inside this thing to find out how it made the jump from animals to humans. This article on the screen is from January 2020, back at the beginning of it. And it's from a group of Indian medical scientists who studied the genetic material early on. This article reveals amazing findings. What they found was nearly identical to another that arose in China 15 years ago, but with some significant differences. But first, it's important to note that the scientific article was never peer-reviewed, but rather was withdrawn. The authors said it was withdrawn because of its controversial findings, and although the authors promised to repost it after addressing concerns, they never did, which to this channel is suspect because this was a very important article. The fact that no future scientific articles by these scientists or others have been able to suggest a genetic means for the evolution or development of it makes this withdrawal of the article even more suspect. In fact, it should make everyone watching this video question the whole genetic origin question. Scientists have been able to study this for over a year's period of time. Doesn't it seem odd that no one has suggested a means by which it evolved? If this scientific article on the screen right now is correct, the reason no one has been able to suggest a path from animal to human is it wasn't a natural development. It didn't come from animal to human. Let's quote the summary statement of the scientists. The evolution of 2019-NCOV remains elusive. We found 4 insertions in the spike glycoprotein, which are unique to the 2019-NCOV and are not present in others. We need to stop right there. Anyone thinking this evolved naturally needs to answer the question, where do these 4 inserts in the genetic material of the original come from? Obviously, not from others, bat, mammal, etc., since none of them contain the same material as the inserts. And it wasn't a single insert, but 4 of them all at one time. So let's say that again. This has material in it not found in any other similar on Earth. That should stop you in your tracks right there. So why do most scientific articles that you've seen about it say it evolved naturally, possibly in an animal market, without providing any idea of how it happened? Ask yourself, if this evolved from animals, why haven't they been rounding up infected animals or testing them to see if they have this material in them? That's because they won't find it there. It's not in the animals. It didn't come from there. The question of origins may also be the reason that the article was withdrawn. There may have been pressure. As the article indicates, these scientists get their grants from a foundation run by the owner of one of the biggest social media outlets. Could that be an issue? Could this owner have put pressure on them? Well, maybe or maybe not. But let's continue because it gets even more interesting if that's even possible. Again, we quote the article. Quote, importantly, amino acid residues in all of the 4 inserts have identity or similarity to those in the HIV-1, GP120, or HIV-1 GAG. Interestingly, despite the inserts being discontinuous on the primary amino acid sequence, 3D modeling of the 219-NCOV suggests that they converge to constitute the receptor binding site. Wow, what does that mean? Let's take apart what they said for our non-medical viewers, because although the scientists' wording is challenging, what they say is an absolutely explosive finding, an incredible finding. As many of you know, in order to get one of these things to bind with a human cell like it does, they need a binding site. This is a particular area of the thing that fits hand in glove with the area of the human cell. In this particular one, the binding site is on the infamous, and this receptor on the cell is known as an ACE2 receptor. However, in regard to this, it appears the binding site is made up entirely of the additions or inserts that were added to the original, either naturally or maybe they were added artificially. Maybe it was engineered. These 4 separate inserts also happen to be the portion of the thing that is not found on any other of them. Are you beginning to see why this article was withdrawn, or why we're talking so funny in this video? Of course. And you know what? This article gets even better. It seems that these 4 additions were identical or nearly identical to genetic material of 2 different HIV viruses. These inserts were on 4 different positions of the genetic material of it. They seem to be randomly scattered throughout that genetic material, but, and here is the amazing part, when the protein that this thing makes is twisted into its 3D shape, all 4 of these inserted pieces that look like they were random come together and touch each other. And the spot where they come together forms the binding site for the human cell, the most important part of it. Let's say that again, because non-scientists may not realize that proteins are actually 3-dimensional and twist and turn like a Gorgon's knot. And it is this shape that proteins turn into that gives them their special properties. In this case, this twisting makes the 4 inserted pieces, which were added at different places in the genetic material, suddenly all come together. And get this portion of the protein is the active part, the part that's going to bind to the human cell. Now, in order to believe that this mechanism we just described was a random natural event, 4 different inserts had to be added all at the same time from 2 different HIV viruses in exactly the right locations on the protein, and then twist perfectly to form a working binding site. Not just only any binding site, but the one that has made this very transmissible and very virulent. It doesn't seem natural, does it? The scientists agreed. Here is the final statement from their abstract. Quote, "The finding of 4 unique inserts in the 2019 NCOV, all of which have similarity to amino acid residues in key structural proteins of HIV-1, is unlikely to be fortuitous in nature." In other words, they're saying it was engineered by a human. It's their words, not ours. But let's dig deeper. It has always been suspected by some that this could have come out of the East Asian lab. There were arguments in 2020 between the USA and that East Asian country about who created this. But now we know how it originated, we may have better ideas. The East Asian lab is involved in something known as gain-of-function research. In other words, taking known things and making them more transmissible or more deadly. This controversial type of research is supposedly done to prepare vaccines in advance for these things that could potentially evolve. Since this seemed to be unnatural and unable to evolve in this way, it had another purpose. So if it was designed, it was likely designed as a weapon. But who was behind it? It is an East Asian lab, but the USA has connections here. Did you know that? This lab was heavily supported by the American NIH to do this type of gain-of-function research on these things, engineering them to make them more virulent and more transmissible. Dozens of these grants, totaling millions of dollars, were given to this East Asian lab and are mostly administered through a single individual, extending back over 10 years. Early on, guess who the leading expert the media chose was to talk about how this evolved? None other than this guy. Talk about a fox guarding the henhouse. Of course, he said it developed by natural evolution. The man was paid to engineer new killer ones. Is he the best expert to be quoted by the media that it was only natural evolution? That it came from animals and was not engineered? Guess what? He is still giving interviews. Here is what he said to Bloomberg in February 2021. These things are passed along convoluted rivers of emergence, and tracing that journey is complicated and will take a really long time. Of course, but he knows exactly how it happened, doesn't he? So unless you believe this guy, the only real question is whether this was accidentally released or intentionally released. If it was intentional, it would be one of the greatest crimes against humanity of all time. How and why would anyone do such a thing? A 2000 study was published on possible scenarios for the future. One of these scenarios involved a similar pandemic and its aftermath they called lockstep. The scenario warned of the world-altering effect of this type of disease on economies and on the possible move toward a totalitarian government worldwide because of this disease. So that might be your answer. Anyone interested in crashing world economies, crashing governments, and establishing a totalitarian government worldwide in their place, they would be your culprits. But either way, this has certainly played right into the hands of many people. The lockdowns have destroyed small businesses, concentrating even more money in the hands of the rich. And world citizens are being trained to comply with governments in many ways, such as masks or taking daily temperatures, just as the research paper suggested. How are these other things involved? They certainly seem effective, 90% or more. Will this solve the problem? Well, in the fall of 2020, documents were leaked about something known as the Great Reset. Now, although the Great Reset is a real plan endorsed by many governments around the world, such as China and the USA, as a way to contend with the disease, these leaked documents indicate the planned release of a second one, resulting in even more severe lockdowns this year with the intention of crashing all the governments and economies of the world. We don't know if these leaked documents are factual or not. But might that second one already be in circulation in the form of the South African or UK variants. Maybe. But whether it's a more dangerous new one or a more dangerous variant of the old one, a new set of lockdowns would accomplish the goal of crashing economies worldwide and governments en route to a totalitarian government of the world. How will new variants affect these other things? Well, it isn't known. The South African variant carries a mutation in the spike protein. Francois Ballot, the director of the University College London Genetics Institute, says in a statement about the mutation, quote, "The E484K mutation has been shown to reduce antibody recognition, which may help it bypass the immune protection provided by either prior infections or these other things." In February 2021, South Africa suspended these other things because they simply weren't working against the variant. So maybe these other things will be ineffective. But could these other things make a variant even more lethal? Not less, not be neutral, but make it more lethal. Yes, it can by means of something called antibody-dependent enhancement. This complicated sounding process happens when an antibody made by these other things binds to a thing, but doesn't neutralize it or kill it. In this way, the human body recognizes the antibody as part of itself, part of the body. And since it's attached to the thing, it invites the thing into its cell. The result is overwhelming infection. James Naismith, the director of the Rosalind Franklin Institute, says, quote, "The so-called South African strain has a number of changes, and scientists are working flat out to understand their significance. Some of these changes are quite significant." On this channel, we'd like to know that since there are so many changes or so-called mutations of the variant, do these changes bear any similarity to HIV? Remember, the original has insertions from 2 HIV viruses. It would look like this: 2 A's and 2 B's, where the A's are from one HIV strain and the B's are from the other. But what if, in the South African variant, both B's of the original were changed out, were engineered out, and the new variant had all 4 A's instead? That it would create a binding site with all 4 A's. What if they came from that one HIV virus? It would likely then improve the binding and strengthen the infectious agent. And guess what? The South African variant is stronger, just as we predicted it would be if it was made this way. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone will be allowed to research this idea or publish such results, but it sure would be interesting to know them because this is our theory on how they're doing it. However, the idea of these other things causing a worsening of the disease from this variant beyond its natural strength is more frightening, given that millions have already taken one of these things, especially if this effect was intentional and planned out in advance. Now, we don't know whether these things will have that worsening effect or not. Only time will tell. But if the variant seems to be just absolutely terrible, and disease is rampant and it's very, very strong and deadly, know that it is likely this effect we're talking about and not the variant itself. That it's coming from these things. The solution to all this would be a drug that could provide protection for this thing that wasn't one of these things. And such a drug may exist. This channel's founder was given this medication by his physician, and it has this name: Numerous videos have been taken down by social media because they mention the name of this medicine. Why? Because a medicine like this would ruin any plans to crash the world economies and take over the world. Obviously, the discovery that this medicine works was accidental and would not have been anticipated by the global elites if they were planning everything in advance a couple years ago. It could also be shadow banned for other reasons, but the objection to the medication makes sense mostly if this is truly a conspiracy and not just a theory. And that's why we're talking so funny in this video. If you are interested in learning more about this medicine, leading world scientists have researched the evidence for it. Their website and the information about it is down in the description. So print it out, give it to your physician, and let them have a serious look at it. This is the lamp, and this is truly a dark place that we are looking at today.